Good morning, dear members, some of the members of media present over here. Welcome to the fourth edition of Navrasa Duende Movie Festival. Smell of paddy burning. I like the smell of paddy burning. It smells of victory of democracy. How do you like a dialogue like that? I mean, these are kind of dialogues which have been used in the movie Apocalypse Now. The exact dialogue was that I like the smell of napalm in the morning, smells of victory. That was said by the lieutenant colonel there in Vietnam who ordered a bombarding to create a surfing facility and destroyed villages. And to tell you, napalm is a gel which was used during the Second War for the bombardment. The special thing about it is that the gel, wherever it sticks when it falls, it raises the temperature to the extent of 5,000 Fahrenheit. The burning which it does introduces something like converts 20% of the oxygen into CO, and therefore anybody around for half an hour should not be alive. So somebody who has done this kind of an act, next morning is having good morning and saying how he loves smell of napalm. This was a way of saying that it is a barbecue, and in barbecue we are roasting people, humans who are substandard. Those are the kind of nuances which this movie uses. It raises very holistic, very larger questions about war, about humanity, about nature, and it deep dives, really deep dives in the whole thing. Its impact was immense, I think, on the Vietnam War. In fact, it uses only as a background and is not truly a Vietnam War movie. But the impact it had, in fact, within America was, I think, more than any movie had. To discuss this movie, we have Mr. Gautam Kaul as my co-panelist, and with the kind of background he has, he understands all this very well. And I think it will be our privilege to listen from him what about this movie and the impact it had in his time.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'll just take 5 minutes because this is a film which has a running time of about 153 minutes, and it's going to strain your patience while sitting in the chair. It's a beautiful film otherwise, as a production. But let me warn you, this is one of the most brutal films ever made in the world. Apologists say that this is an anti-war film. You will perhaps realize that this is not an anti-war film because there's nothing to speak against the war. You will see very long war scenes done very well as a production. But you will not perhaps see a message that war is bad. Because war is, or fighting a war, or being part of an army, is a primitive instinct of humankind. And despite this film, and despite many other films, we still continue to have wars, and this kind of war also. The film is actually been created with Vietnam War in the background. When Francis wanted to film this story, he requested Vietnam government to assist him, saying that this is an anti-war film. But the Vietnamese government refused permission. He had to shift his entire team to Philippines, where he was allowed to shoot the film on the condition that the national government will not fund him at all. So he had to pay for everything, including the helicopters that you see in large numbers. They did double duty. In free time, they were at the shooting site. Otherwise, they were being used by the Philippine army for actual warfare. A small warning for you. Kindly do not leave the hall when the credit rolls have finished. Because for the next 8 minutes, you are going to see footage of napalm bombing in Vietnam. And this is an accident which people do not know, and they start walking out, and then suddenly, for the next 8 minutes, you find the screen ablaze. So kindly remain seated until the whole production comes to a final end. The storyline is rather thin, because essentially it narrates the journey of a person assigned to assassinate a renegade colonel who has taken refuge in Cambodia. So it's the journey up the river Mekong, and on the way, this person, the assassin, encounters incidents, he encounters villagers, he meets a lot of people. And then in between also, there is conflict. A rather brutish manner in which this whole conflict episodes are filmed. And finally, he is face to face with his objective. And that happens to be Marlon Brando, rather obese. And in fact, what happened was that when the film shooting was on, Brando was assigned this role, and he delayed the production because of various eccentricities. And when he appeared in Philippines, he was heavily overweight. And then the director decided to use that physical person of the actor to show the kind of brutal nature which this colonel had. And he was a veteran of the Vietnam War. So that aspect was added to the film. There is hardly any romance in this film. And to that extent, the film is, let us say, anti-war. But I have seen a lot of anti-war films. And if you have the time and the inclination, there is a small film made in 1954, The Burmese Harp, which is considered the best anti-war film ever made. It's only of 59 minutes duration, and you can also click into the Google and then reach the Wikipedia, and you then type out The Burmese Harp. It's a small film, but it is very effective. So this is, I've warned you on the brutality of this film. The film was released first in USA. It did not get the kind of, it did not get the kind of reception that it was expected. Then it moved out to Europe. And there the European audiences reacted to this film very sharply, because they had been subject to the Second World War. And there were many members in the audience who had first-hand experience of facing the kind of destruction which wars impose. So when they protested against this film, then the American audience reacted as a kind of a response to the European audiences. And finally, the film got 2 Oscars for Best Camera Work and Best Sound. Its theme music is quite well known amongst the music interests worldwide. The British Film Institute also recognized this film for its production, not the message. And Francis Ford Coppola thinks this is one of his best works. So we can now start the film, and best of luck to you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaul, for such a nice introduction. If I may add a couple of lines, the movie Coppola, the issues he wanted to raise were very holistic issues. Firstly, he was raising the issue of, we think that in humanity that we are enemy of each other, we are killing each other, we can kill each other, why we should not? And we forget that, the backdrop of the entire Vietnam and the forests was used to create a metaphor in a way that today we do not know whom we will be eating and who will eat us. So that is the struggle we are in. We are forgetting one thing, that there is a much, much bigger enemy and friend both, with much bigger jaw, and that is nature. It can kill us without feeling guilty, without assigning any rationale, without doing anything. So do we want to forget nature? Do we want to inhabit it in a forest where there are jungle laws? There is no culture. Those are the kind of issues he raised, and to raise these issues, he took a lot of references from literature, from music world, from films, from, it ranges, basically this movie was based on Heart of Darkness, the book which was written on somebody, a similar character, who rebelled against the European colonialism in Congo. And he became a local god there. So that was actually the inspiration. He also used the Herzog's movie, Azure, The Wrath of God, in which the entire this forest thing was included, where people became insane. He used Wagner's music, The Ride of Valkyries, so effectively during the bombardment scene. He also used Jim Morrison, The Door, The End, and Eliot's poetry and literature so effectively. And he used all this, but all the same, the fusion he created was very original. The end product is very original. And Mr. Kaul said in one of the interviews, Coppola himself, somebody said, "It's the greatest anti-war movie you made." And he said, "No, I don't consider it as anti-war movie. If I had shown romance happening during the war period, and how scarce it can be, how difficult it can be to romance during the wartime, that could have shown that really in normal times what you are going through and getting in a very normal way, how precious it can be during the wartime." So that kind of a theme could have been anti-war, not this one. All these things have been used, and yes, it got only 2 Oscars, one for cinematography and one for sound. And yes, it was one of the most beautifully crafted movie, cinematographed movie, and sound. It was right in 79, Dolby, 5-channel, 2 from behind the screen, 3 from the audience side. All those things were there. But Americans, the way initially they reacted, "Hey, Coppola, you are good with The Godfather. Don't get into very idealistic things and make it heavy on us." to that. That was some of the critics' reaction to start with, that you're exceeding your shoe. I mean, holistic thinking of humanity is not your cup of tea, stick to Godfather. It was Roger Ebert kind of critics there, and as you rightly say, Palme d'Or award in France, and the world took a notice of, and with time it became one of the great movies that we know about. I hope you'll... but one thing I must say, this cinematography for which it got awarded, it's so beautiful movie on the screen. In fact, personally, when I was watching this movie, at times I thought that yes, it is very nice, very well done, but is it distracting my attention from the subject because I'm appreciating cinematography more, or is it supporting the terror, the horror? At times I was confused. So sometimes something very good can also be hindrance in the motion. That is the only thing. Very good at the same time. That was my original observation. No critic wrote like that. I hope you'll enjoy this movie. Thank you very much.